In this lesson, we're going to look at what we call vertex form of a parabola. And that's because the formula is written in such a way that we can easily identify the vertex, which is super helpful because if you remember in the last lesson, we had to use a crazy formula and lots of calculations to find the vertex point. So when it's given to you in vertex form, it is so helpful. Now this formula all the way up top, f of x equals a times x minus h squared plus k, is vertex form. The h value is a horizontal shift and the k value is a vertical shift. So what does that mean? When the h value is greater than 0, then we translate whatever that number is, units, to the right. And when the h value is negative or less than 0, it translates to the left. Now, something tricky happens though, because since the formula is x minus h, if I had, for example, I'm just going to make up a very simple equation, y equals 2 times x minus 3 squared plus 4. You're like, that's not simple, but it will be in a second. This is the h value right here, this number, but it looks like it's minus 3. It looks like it's a negative 3 shift, but since the formula has a minus in it, the 3 is actually positive. If I changed it to 2 times x plus 3 squared plus 4, then even though our h value looks positive, it's actually negative because the formula was minus. So you have to remember that when you are talking about the h value. All right, let's move on. So we're going to take our formula and we're going to easily find the vertex. Something that confuses a lot of kids is they ask, what does this 1/2 do? And the 1/2 has nothing to do with the vertex. Remember, it just tells you whether the parabola got narrower or wider. So we are not going to use it in this step right here to find the vertex. What we're going to do is we're going to remember that the formula is a times x minus h squared plus k, but we'll get to the k in a moment. So if I look at this equation, is my h value positive or negative? The answer is positive. So this means that the vertex is at positive 4, and then it's at 0 because there's no k value. We'll get to that in a little bit. Remember, I told you we were going to baby step through all the different parabolas. So the vertex is at 4, 0. I didn't need any formula. I didn't need to plug in any numbers. All I have to do is look at the formula and know that my vertex is at 4, 0. Now, in order to graph it, which is what they want, we have to make an XY chart. And I'm going to put 4, 0 right in the center. And I'm going to go 2 up and 2 down. So here's where the 1/2 comes into play. What you're going to do is you're going to take the formula and you're going to plug those values in. So it's 1/2 times 2 minus 4 squared, 1/2 times 3 minus 4 squared, and then you can just symmetry the other two if you have assurance that you did your calculations correctly. So this is going to be 1/2 of negative 2 squared. So that's 1/2 of 4. So half of 4 is 2. I'll symmetry that down here. And then this is 1/2 of negative 1 squared. So that's half of 1, which is 1/2. So I'll symmetry that. All right, now let's graph it. So I'm going to make my grid. I don't need any special arrangement of the y values, but I do need to make sure that I can fit all the way up to 6. So I'm going to shift my y-axis over a little so I mostly see the positive x values. So now let's plot 2, 2, 3, 1/2, 4, 0, 5, 1/2, and 6, 2. That is our function g of x. And the last thing they want us to do is they want us to compare it to f of x equals x squared. Now, we don't need to graph that. We've seen that a billion times, right? That goes here, then it goes through there. Then, I mean, I just said I didn't need to graph it, and I did anyway. But that's the parabola, right? So it got shifted 4 to the right, and it got wider. All right, now let's incorporate the k value. Like I said earlier, the k value is going to shift it vertically. So we just shifted it horizontally. Now we're going to shift it vertically. And I already called this vertex form, so we can fill that in. The graph of vertex form is a translation h units horizontally and k units vertically. So you see in this picture, once they figured out what h and k were, they took the standard form, regular origin parabola, and they shifted it h spaces horizontally and k spaces vertically. The width of the parabola doesn't necessarily change unless the coefficient changes. Now let's look at one that has both an h and a k and a coefficient. Whoa. So I can look at my equation and I am going to ignore the -2 because that doesn't have to do with the vertex. And the vertex is right here at hk. Now remember that h is minus. So is this h value positive or negative? It's negative because in order to go from a minus to a plus, the 2 had to have been negative, so it would be x minus -2. You get it. So the vertex is actually at -2, 3, because the 3 is positive, so this 3 is positive. This h value is negative, so the vertex is negative. So now I'm going to make my table. And I'm going to put -2, 3 right in the middle. And I go 2 up and 2 down. And I would like to see how good you are with your order of operations. Please pause the video and fill in the chart on your own. Now be careful when I taught you in the earlier lesson that the c value is the y-intercept, so we could just grab that c value. This doesn't have a c value if you look at the formula, so 0 doesn't necessarily mean that it's 3. So just be careful of that. Make sure that you are actually calculating. So I've got my points. Let's just graph it and be done. -4, -5, -3, 1, -2, 3, -1, 1, and 0, -5. All right, let's make the parabola. That's g of x. And they want us to talk about how it compares to f of x. And now you actually don't even really need to have graphed it once you know how all of the parts interact with each other. So you can look at this equation and you could have answered this compare sentence first if you really wanted to. You could say g of x is narrower because it's 2. It's facing down because of the negative. It is shifted 2 left because the h value is negative, and 3 up because the k value is positive. All right, that's going to wrap up this lesson, and if you have any questions, write them down and ask me when you come to class.